Hello and welcome to my channel if this is the first video of mine that you are watching, but if it is not, welcome back. Today, as you can tell by the title, I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in August, the books I'm currently reading, and then the books I hope to get to in September. And there are a few books that have carried over from my August TBR into September, so we'll get to those in a little bit. But first, the cocktail pairing that I would like to go with today's Distilled Reads video is a bourbon and berries cocktail. I found the idea for this cocktail on Instagram, so I'll leave a link to the original creator down below. But while they used blueberry jam for this bourbon and berries, I decided to use my bumbleberry jam. And bumbleberry might be a Canadian or just an East Coast thing, but the way that my mom always explained it to me was just that it's a mixed berry jam. So my bumbleberry jam this year includes Haskell's, raspberries, and strawberries because I made it last month before the blueberries were out. But so I included half a tablespoon of the bumbleberry jam, almost a full ounce of lemon juice, then a few mint leaves, and about 1.5 ounces of bourbon. And then I shook it in my shaker with some ice before pouring it over even more ice and topping with a mint leaf there. But it smells really fruity and tart and just delicious. So I'm really looking forward to giving this a try. So cheers. I really love this cocktail. I can see myself making this over and over again in the future because it was so simple and easy to make. And I love the touch of adding jam for some of that sweetness, but it's not overpowering. It's not too sweet at all, I would say. Yeah, bourbon and berries is an absolute win in my books. Now let's dive right into the books, and I'm going to start with a comic book series because I read Revival volumes 2 through 5 at the tail end of July and the very beginning of August. And I had spoken about this series in my July books and August TBR video. And basically I still feel about the same way regarding this series. It is very much a testament of its time. You can tell that it was written in the mid-2010s and that it was written and illustrated by male authors because the male gaze remained quite heavy throughout the other 4 volumes that I read. It kind of like went through peaks and valleys because I think volume 2, I felt like things were evening out a little bit and the male gaze was softening, but then volume 3 brought it right back. And I believe it was the tail end of volume 4 in which there was a scene that was revealed in the next volume to really have no purpose, but it was at one of the female characters' expense. So I still have all of those same feelings regarding this series. Regarding the characters, I find them interesting. They're not necessarily inventing the wheel. I do love the premise of this series, and little bits are being revealed and little bits are being added that make me question where everything is going to end up. So I do plan on finishing the last 3 volumes in this series, 6, 7, and 8, hopefully within the next few months. I won't say that it's on my September TBR, but I am hoping to get to it before the end of the year, I would say, because I do really want to know how this all pans out. And I'm intrigued by the premise of there being this revival day for one day within this small town and the surrounding villages, because it takes place within a county. In my previous video, I said it takes place just within the confines of one town, but it takes place within a county. So within this county on one day, I believe it's January 2nd, all of the dead come back to life. So if you died on January 2nd, on January 3rd, you woke back up and your family would have mourned you. Perhaps you were being buried and suddenly you're back up walking, talking, living all over again. And for the most part, people seem okay, they seem normal, but there's a few people who are exhibiting signs of superhuman strength and slightly eerie behavior. So the series is following Dana, who is a member of the police within this county, within her small town. Her father is the chief of police, and she also has a younger sister who is going to university. So those are our three main characters, and I won't reveal too much more than that because I don't want to spoil anything. But we follow them as they are trying to navigate and understand what the heck is happening within their hometown and to their neighbors and friends and everyone who has been affected by Revival Day. The illustrations, while at times very male gaze heavy, were stunning. There were a few in particular that I did just stop and stare at because I found them to be so beautiful, so haunting. There is a fair bit of blood and gore depicted on the page because this is kind of like a zombie novel and you're dealing with people who can't really die. So you have to get creative with how you try to protect yourself and stop them. But overall, I'm pretty sure I rated volumes 2 through 5, some variant of 3. I think one of them might have been a 3.5, but overall this series has been a pretty steady 3. Like, I'm enjoying it. I'm not hating it by any means, but it's not a series that I would lose sleep over. That's the way I've been kind of pitching it and describing it. It's not a series that has pulled me in and I will sacrifice my sleep to get to the end. I'm very happy to just pick it up, read a little bit, and then carry on with my day. Case in point, I finished volume 5 back at the beginning or middle of August. Back at the middle of August. And I haven't yet picked up volume 6. So that in itself is quite telling because we are nearing the conclusion and events are ramping up. But those were the first 4 titles that I read in August. The next book that I picked up was One Last Stop by McQuiston. If you watched my last monthly wrap up or the reading vlog that I did to go along with my reading of The Pairing, you will know that I absolutely adore McQuiston. I loved Red, White, and Royal Blue, and I loved The Pairing, which just came out recently. But I was never really compelled to pick up One Last Stop. It involves time travel and dual timelines and a character being stuck within time and character B trying to get them out and either send them to their own time or keep them in the current timeline. And time travel or dual timelines is not a trope that I particularly love. I can't think of an example of it in a book that had me absolutely captivated and I fell in love with it. I'm always a little bit critical and a little bit hesitant, and that's just me as a reader. It's not a trope that I naturally gravitate towards. So I have not picked up One Last Stop because it just didn't excite me that much. However, I usually don't love second chance romance tropes, which is the core of The Pairing, and I fell in love with The Pairing. So I was hoping that McQuiston would be able to convince me otherwise and would make me fall in love with time travel throughout One Last Stop. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case. I think I gave One Last Stop again 3 stars, 3.5 stars. It was okay, but there were a few bits and pieces of like these 2 overlapping timelines that just didn't gel right with me. So if you are someone who doesn't mind time travel and you're looking for a very nostalgic, I would say, romp through New York City and evoking all of those past vibes, maybe check it out. It might be for you. It is a female-female romance. I did enjoy the characters, but I wanted to love them, and I never fell in love with them the way I've fallen in love with previous McQuiston characters. So for that reason, I believe this one was 3 or 3.5 stars. The next book that I read is another romance, and that is For Butter or Worse by Erin Rosa. And unfortunately, this one was also a 3-star read for me. This was one that I did go into kind of expecting it would be middle of the road for me, because I'm not one who gets very excited by reality TV show themes within books. And that is like the core of this book. We're following 2 hosts who work on a reality TV show cooking competition, and they seemingly hate one another, but then they have to pretend that they are dating one another. And of course, they end up falling in love during the whole fake dating trope. And I love fake dating, so I was hoping that that trope would offset my meh feelings towards the reality TV show setting, but this one was still just middle of the road. The characters felt a little bit surface level to me. There was just something about them that felt very stilted to me. It felt very much like just going through the motions, and I didn't really buy into their emotions, which is kind of the whole point with romance novels. You want to feel that tension, that desire, that love, and I never really felt that with our 2 characters in For Butter or Worse. I will say that I did enjoy the banter between the 2 of them, and I adored how this was very faintly an autumnal read, because it is set during the fall. However, it is set in Los Angeles, so LA autumn is very different from like East Coast Canada autumn. But there were still, like, they went on a date to a pumpkin patch, their Halloween takes place throughout the timeline of this book, and there was just little casual mentions like that, which I really liked. It was very faintly autumn, and that felt like the perfect read for August, September time for me, at least. So I didn't hate this book again by any means, but I didn't absolutely fall in love with it. I will be continuing on with the series, however, because that was the main reason I picked up For Butter or Worse. The synopsis of Plot Twist by Erin Rosa really interests me, so I'm looking forward to that one. The next book that I picked up was Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. And for all of the Maas fans, I'm finally starting to like this series. Not that I hated the series previously, but I felt a little bit ambivalent towards it. And I was just trying to plod through to form my own opinions, because so many people adore Throne of Glass and Atwater and Crescent City that I wanted to see what the hype was all about. And up until Heir of Fire, I didn't really care about any of the characters. I wasn't invested in whether they lived or died, and in a like high stakes fantasy setting, that's kind of important. But finally, with Heir of Fire, the wheels are moving in a direction that maybe it's just because I haven't seen as many spoilers for the last couple of books. Things are taking me a little bit by surprise. Obviously, I still know the general direction, but I think a few of the smaller plot points I wasn't aware of. So those are catching me by surprise, and I'm feeling more invested in the series just because there are those little twists and turns. I will say that I'm not fully connected to the characters just yet. There's something that's holding me back from fully investing in their journeys and their plight and the reason that they're on this path. However, I'm caring more for them now than I did in the previous 3 books. So that is something I would say. But because it's taken me 4 books to care about these characters, it still kind of ranks middle of the road. I gave Heir of Fire 3.5 stars out of 5. I will be continuing on with the series, maybe not in September, but hopefully by October or so. I'm not sure if I'll finish the series this year, but at the very latest, it will be early 2025. The next book that I read was Small Miracles by Olivia Atwater, which was another book that I enjoyed, but I didn't fall in love with. I really liked the way that Atwater tackled a world in which fallen angels and guardian angels are walking among us, but it took me a little while to get into Small Miracles. Part of that is because Atwater uses footnotes throughout the book, especially in the very beginning, to add more context to the world. But footnotes are something that just personally irk me within fiction novels, because if it's important to the plot, I should just be reading it as part of the prose. I don't want to flip back and forth between the end of one sentence. It just is a very disjointed way of storytelling for me personally. So that was kind of a fence in my way when I was trying to get into Small Miracles. It was stopping me from really immersing myself in the world. As well, there was also a system of merit points, which is a large part of the book. That took me a while to get my head around as well, because I'm not sure if it's just me and math or if it just was not explained very clearly at the beginning, but it took me a little bit to understand the merit points. Eventually the footnotes slowed down, so it wasn't quite as disruptive to my reading. And I did find our fallen angel character very endearing. I loved the humans that they were interacting with. There are themes of parental loss throughout Small Miracles, but I will say that I really appreciated the way that Atwater articulated grief and the journey of grief, as well as how she emphasized how individual each person's grief journey is, even if you are grieving for the same person. So while I didn't love Small Miracles, I still enjoyed it, and I still found it to be a fun, quick-paced, entertaining read. So I will be continuing on with reading more of Atwater's bibliography, and I am really looking forward to it. Then the final two books that I read in August were both 4.5 5-star reads. So I ended the month on a really, really good note for reading. The first of those is A Fire Endless by Rebecca Ross, which I listened to the audio narration of this book, and I absolutely fell in love with the narrator. And it was so much fun to see the end of this duology, to reach the conclusion and to find out how Jack made his way through everything. I absolutely loved the first book in the Elements of Cadence duology, which is A River Enchanted. And that book introduced us to the island of Cadence, which is very, very reminiscent of Scotland, with heather on the hills and rolling moors, and very mischievous fae folk who can change the lay of the land that will end up in you getting lost and being prey to their wiles. There is magic on this island. I wouldn't say the Elements of Cadence, it is a fantasy series, but it feels a lot more like magical realism. And I loved the magic system within this world because there are really tangible effects to the use of magic. There is a physical toll that it can take on you, at least on one side of the island. So I love magical systems that have a direct cost on their users. It's not just a free-for-all. And I really, really appreciated and enjoyed the way that Ross wrapped up this duology with A Fire Endless. It was a beautiful, beautiful tale. I would say this duology is best enjoyed slowly. The way that Ross writes is very lyrical, it's very descriptive, and to best take that in, I read the first book and then listened to the audiobook of the second. And both ways, I think you really want to sit with some of the prose in order to best appreciate and enjoy some of the magic that Ross is imbuing through her writing. But yes, A Fire Endless, I absolutely loved it. I'm so excited to have read a few books by Ross now. I think I'm gonna pick up Divine Rivals next. I believe that's the name of her YA fantasy series. But if you're looking for a lyrical, descriptive, fantasy, magical realism duology that tackles themes of love and loss and bereavement, family, loyalty, check out this duology. It was amazing and I absolutely loved it. Then the final book that I read in the month of August was Nettle Bone by T. Kingfisher, and I absolutely adored this book. This is the 7th book that I've read by T. Kingfisher, and I have fallen in love with their writing. I discovered Kingfisher for the very first time this year. Obviously, I've heard about them previously, but I've only ever heard of Kingfisher within the horror genre, which isn't something that I particularly read a whole lot of or enjoy. But this year I discovered their dark fantasy and the Saint of Steel series. So that was my introduction to Kingfisher's world, and Nettle Bone was no disappointment. I will say this book begins very dramatically, and I did have a moment of, oh no, what have I gotten myself into? Because it does lean a little bit towards the horror side of things, not just dark fantasy, at least with the introduction. The introduction is very macabre, but I trusted in Kingfisher and pushed through, and trusted in Bookish Chaz too. And I absolutely adored this series. I don't want to spoil what takes place, but this is a dark fairy tale retelling, and Kingfisher does an incredible job, not just in this book, but in everything I've read by them, in taking particular tropes and turning them on their head and really pointing out the flaws in some of the things that have just become part of our day-to-day within storytelling. Kingfisher has no hesitation in pointing out the confusing, or why would we want that to be the standard. So Nettle Bone was really enjoyable, and I do love the little tagline that is included within the book's description before it delves into the synopsis. But it just says that this isn't the kind of fairy tale where the princess marries a prince. It's the one where she kills him. And it was such a great take on our heroine on a quest, on an impossible quest. And Kingfisher brings together this ragtag band who join our main protagonist on her quest to go and kill a prince. And it was dramatic, it was tense, there was a little bit of love in there, which you know that I love. And it was another book about loyalty and family and friendship and perseverance. It was just amazing. I absolutely love it. I borrowed Nettle Bone from Libby, but I 100% want to go and pick up a physical copy of it because it is one that I would love to reread. If you haven't read Nettle Bone yet, I think it's the perfect dark fairy tale for the autumn months. So let me know if you have read it, what your thoughts are, or if you are planning on reading it. So those were the books that I read in August. And if you watched my July books in August TBR video, you will likely note that there are many books that I had on my August TBR that I did not get to, but I'm hoping to in September. How many months can I say that I hope to get to my TBR finally before I just need to reshuffle things? But I'm going to talk about the books that I'm currently reading and then the books that I hope to get to in September. The first book that I'm currently reading is Furies of Calderon by Jim Butcher. This book is on my 24 for 2024 TBR, so I'm hoping to get through that list of 24 books before the end of December. I am about 2/3 of the way through Furies of Calderon, which is the first book in the Codex Alera series. I am enjoying it. I will say this is another book in which it is very apparent that this was first published in the early 2000s. And if you have read the Dresden Files, you know the way that Butcher writes women in that time is dated by about 20 years. So it was very strange for me to go from the last Dresden Files book, in which Butcher's writing has improved tremendously, and then jump back in time and begin this, because my mind was still expecting what I have come to know from Butcher. So his depiction of women so far in this book has not been fantastic. There is also a lot of violence in this book, and almost all of that violence takes place to women, which is just, you know, great fun to read. But overall, again, it's an interesting premise. It is set in a Roman imperial-esque fantasy world, and most of the people who exist within this world have something called a fury, which is an elemental power that they can call on, and it's very individual. Like, their fury has a name, and they can call on them to control some element of either water or earth or wind, air. Our main protagonist, Tavi, does not have a fury, so he is powerless in this world of power. And we're following him on a quest, on a journey, and it will eventually turn out that apparently Tavi is kind of the boy savior and is what is going to help save his country, his homeland, his family. So I have wanted to read this book for several years. I'm happy that I'm finally getting to it. I'm flipping back and forth between reading the physical copy and listening to the audiobook, which is narrated by Kate Redding, and I adore Kate's narration. So I imagine that I will finish this in the coming week, and then I will slowly chip away at the rest of the series. But it's kind of middle of the road so far. We'll see what the conclusion does to change that rating, but right now, middle of the road for Furies of Calderon. Then the only other book that I am currently reading at the moment is Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. This is the final book in the Shadow and Bone trilogy, and I am really excited to be able to say that I've finally read the Shadow and Bone trilogy when that day comes. Again, this series, very similar to Throne of Glass, has been one that I've found middling, and one in which I've not really been able to connect to any of our main characters. And I do think that a large component of that is just the fact that I'm coming to these series so late in the game. I have heard so much discourse already online about these series, so I kind of already knew the twists and turns. That is true for Shadow and Bone, just as it is for Throne of Glass. But I am looking forward to seeing the final showdown in Ruin and Rising. I'm only, I think, a chapter or two in, so I'll finish this one hopefully within the next coming weeks. And so far, I think I'm still too early to really have an opinion on this specific book, but I am excited to finally have reached the third one. Then finally, my September TBR. I'm gonna go through these books quite rapid fire because 4 out of the 6 books I have slated for September are ones that I've already spoken about because they were either on my August TBR or my July TBR, and 3 out of these 4 are on my 24 for 2024 TBR. So the first one, which does not appear on my 24 for 2024 TBR, is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. And I wanted to begin this book, I think, back in June because I really want to do a reread, and I will be doing a reread before Wind and Truth comes out. And I really want to annotate my copy of Way of Kings because I've already reread this book several times now. I'm hoping to view it in a slightly different light if I'm trying to make note of what I would like to annotate and mark down. So I want to read not just this book in the Stormlight Archive, but the next 3 books too. We will see. No, I will get to this book in September. I'm gonna make it happen. I'm willing it into existence. So The Way of Kings is very high on my priority list for September because Wind and Truth is coming out in December, and it is going to be December before we know it. The next book that I had hoped to read in August, but it is being rolled into my September TBR, is Prisoners of Geography, 10 Maps That Explain Everything About the World by Tim Marshall. I'm sure you are sick of hearing me speak this very long title because I've been talking about this book for several months now. And this was supposed to be my non-fiction book for August, but work was a lot in August. And I feel as if what I ended up reading in August was very piecemeal. I was just grabbing what I could in the very small moments and bits of time that I had to read. It was all about convenience reading in August, not necessarily reading what I wanted to set out reading at the beginning of the month. So this is going into my September TBR, and hopefully I will get to it, but reading is supposed to be fun. So I won't beat myself up if I am not in the mood to read Prisoners of Geography in September, but hopefully I will find that mood before the end of the year so that I can tick it off my yearly TBR. Next is a book that I think I will find time for in September, and that is Can't Spell Treason Without T by Rebecca Thorne. This is a cozy fantasy series that is a female-female romance, and it is just two characters escaping from the plights of their fantasy world to open up a little cozy bookshop slash tea shop. And I think this will be great escapism, as well as cozy fantasy feels particularly autumnal to me. So this will be a great book to pick up through September as the air is getting a little bit crisper and the nights are drawing in. I said I was going to do this rapid fire, and I'm certainly trying to. The next book that is on my September TBR was also on my August TBR, and that is Lord of Emperors by Gavriel K. With the current job that I am working at, I have accepted that 2024 is not going to be my year of K. There is just no way that I can finish out K's bibliography working 70 hours a week with only 4 months left of the year. It's just not going to happen. But I still want to read as many K books as I can, especially since he just announced he has a new book coming out in the spring, which I'm so excited for because that one is going to take place or evoke medieval France. So I really want to finish the Sarantine Mosaic. I know I've gotten a few comments from people saying that they absolutely adored Lord of Emperors and that it was amazing. So I'm so excited to finally read it, and I know I keep saying that I hope that it's going to be sooner rather than later, but I really hope it will be sooner rather than later. Then finally, the last book that I am hoping to read in September is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. This is a YA fantasy series that involves lesbian necromancers. And I think necromancy is another perfect autumnal theme. Gideon the Ninth also involves swordplay and cutthroat politics. And I think because it's young adult, this might be a little bit more of a quicker paced read for me to get through. I received Gideon the Ninth as a gift 2 or 3 years ago now, I'm ashamed to admit, but it's on my TBR for the end of the year as well as September, but I'm hoping that I will be able to get to this in September. So those are the books that I read in August, the books I'm currently reading, and the books that I hope to read in September. I know that this is going to be another very long video, so if you have made it through to the end, thank you very much for watching this video, and I will be back soon with a new one. Bye for now.